My name is Brian Pitts, and I am the Assistant Director of the Latin American Institute here at the University of California, Los Angeles. We'd like to welcome you today to this event titled Indigenous Women and Artists, Art as Resistance. We're grateful for the co-sponsorship of UCLA's American Indian Studies Center and UCLA's Department of Anthropology for today's event. Before we go any further, I would like to read the statement of acknowledgement of the indigenous people who are the rightful caretakers and owners of the place where our university is located. UCLA acknowledges the Gabrielino Tongva peoples as the traditional land caretakers of the Los Angeles Basin and Southern Channel Islands. As a land grant institution, we pay our respects to the ancestors, the elders, and our relatives past, present, and emerging. Today's event has been organized and will be moderated by Eugénie Clement, who is a PhD candidate in anthropology at the Ecole des hautes études en sciences sociales, the School for Advanced Social Research in Paris. She is a visiting graduate researcher here at the Latin American Institute and the coordinator of the Californian hub of the Institut des Amériques, with whom the Latin American Institute has a collaboration that has spanned several years. Her own research focuses on anti-capitalist environmental justice within the Navajo Nation in the south, here in the southwestern United States. So Eugénie, if you would like to go ahead and start, take it away.
Sure. Thank you very much for the introduction, Brian. So hello everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today. So it's with a great pleasure that I will moderate this panel centered around Indigenous women as artists and art as resistancy in the process of sovereignty and decolonization. In the United States, Indigenous artists evolve in a world where settler colonial institutions define art and create hierarchy. Indigenous art has been co-opted by settler colonialism and turned into a commodity, something that can be bought and sold. For example, in Gallup, New Mexico, a border town to the Navajo Nation, there are many Indian art shops with white owners where indigenous jewelry, carpets, and so on are being sold to tourists. Most of the time, the Diné, Hopi, or Pueblo creators of these contents are barely mentioned and poorly paid. Yet, they contribute to the economy of these towns centered around the Southwest imaginary. In these same shops, there are plenty of photos of indigenous people without mention of their name or even their consent. So for indigenous artists, visibility and agency are determinant. The purpose of the panel today is to highlight the complexities of being an indigenous woman and an artist. During these three interventions, we'll discuss the importance of storytelling by and from an indigenous perspective, and how a new generation of women uses art in their communities. Historically, a lot has been written and painted even about indigenous people, but what hasn't changed to tell your life, your story with your own words? What have these artists to say about the American society and their own place within it? So the panel will be divided into three interventions. So first, we will start with Dr. Aurélie Journée-Duez. She will give us a presentation of her dissertation work titled Women Artists, Queer and Indigenous, Facing Their Images Toward an Intersectional and Decolonial History of Contemporary Indigenous Artists in the USA and Canada, 1969-2019. She will focus a presentation on the specificities of her research on a virtual field. Besides that, she will highlight the links between art and politics and try to question how indigenous art blur colonizing binary distinctions. The second intervention will be a discussion between Carmen Selam and myself around her work as an indigenous artist. Carmen Selam is a queer Yakama and Comanche multidisciplinary artist working in printmaking, painting, and clay, in addition to being a traditional tribal artist in the field of weaving and beadwork. Her work explores the relationships between living on and off the reservation and how these relations influence her way of life. She tends to use iconography and popular culture as tools to delve deeper into the untold indigenous history of America. She graduated from the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe and holds a Bachelor in Fine Arts. The third panelist, Deidre Peaches, is a Diné director, producer, indie filmmaker, editor, and writer. In 2009, her documentary Shimasani debuted at the Imaginative Film Festival in Toronto, Canada. In 2011, Peaches produced and co-edited The Rocket Boy, an official selection of the 2011 Sundance Film Festival. This led Peaches and Jack Oyungowa, cinematographer, to co-found the independent media company Paper Rocket Productions. In 2013, Paper Rocket Production released To E Ina Ate, which premiered in Paris, France, for the Festival Ciné Alternatif. In 2020, Peaches documented the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic among the Diné population in the Southwest. She will introduce the two documentaries we will have the luck to watch tonight. Let's Sow, The Legacy of Uranium and the Navajo Nation, 2015, and Diné Confront McCain at Window Rocks, also 2015. So we will have time for questions at the end of this intervention after the documentaries. So with no further ado, I'll let Dr. Aurélie Journée-Duez open the floor. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the UCLA and Eugénie, of course, for inviting me to join this wonderful panel. I'm really honored to be here with you all tonight, but this morning for you in the USA. So I also would like to acknowledge that as a white woman, I hope that my presentation will be respectful to the indigenous women practices that I studied. The question at the core of my dissertation was, how does the deconstruction of stereotypes faced by indigenous women take place through the arts? And what are the issues in political, social, and cultural terms? My dissertation attempted to answer these questions thanks to an artistic iconographic corpus, meaning an unusual field in anthropology. In the late 60s, the Indians of all tribes led a movement of social protests to get their rights to sovereignty and self-determination recognized as peoples. So before I forget, I will share my screen. Yes. Can you see it?
Yes, I see it.
Okay. So the American Indian movement take over these political, social, and cultural issues. Together, indigenous women and men started a process of emancipation that has been blocked by assimilationist US governmental policies. In Canada, collective movements also rise in the 80s and 90s, with the highest points during the Restigouche events in 1984 and the Oka crisis in 1990. These major events inspire a whole generation of young indigenous artists and women in particular, who study mostly at the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Thanks to their education, they developed transdisciplinary artistic practices between art and ethnography that highlight the porosity and the flakiness of the borders that have been created in all the sectors by the dominant society against groups regarded as minorities. To do so, the photographic practice, techniques, and image become a strategic, technical, and technological tool of reappropriation and reaffirmation of their identities and representation. These women and queer artists question, thanks to this medium, the way they have been presented and represent themselves in the context of critical practices of the stereotypes that they have been facing for several centuries of cultural appropriation. It enables them to rethink their identities, their relationships to their bodies, their sexualities and genders in terms of paradigms specific to their own spiritualities. through artistic and political images based on an analogy made between the violation of their rights, the exploitation of their lands and territories, and the feminicides perpetrated, they continue to take part in an actual resistance movement against extractivist projects, where they are again at the front line. So based upon an iconographic corpus made of almost 200 artworks through the 70s to now, and individual interviews with women and queer artists and militants from the USA and Canada, my dissertation aimed to show how these images, photographic in particular, try to set up new epistemologies in an intersectional, decolonial, and anti-capitalistic perspective, as part of a process of reaffirmation of the inherent rights of Indigenous peoples granted by the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, adopted in 2007. So the selection of the 200 artworks in my corpus, founded essentially on the internet, responds to different criteria. First, the artworks had to be produced by Indigenous women and queer artists. Then these works had to use the photographic medium. And then finally, these artworks had to be conceived as artwork, not as vernacular objects, for example. So the title of my presentation is the same that my dissertation one. In fact, I would like to try to summarize my research and present it to you by following three parts that Eugénie already presented to you. So in the first place, I will ask how can work an anthropologist on a virtual field? And are you still an anthropologist in that case? The observation that my field is unusual in anthropology requires some details on my method of analysis of the selected works. Before going any further, I think it's important to explain where and how the selection was made. The way in which the iconographic corpus on which my dissertation is based was gathered is linked to the nature of the work studied. Indeed, by being interested in images and more particularly in photography and contemporary photography, I had to study dematerialized artistic productions, many of them first accessible on the internet. In this sense, the digital nature of most of the selected works has complicated the nature of my research here. And I was inspired by the anthropologist, the well-known anthropologist, James Clifford. So I just wanted to show you three examples of his work that inspired me in my research: The Predicament of Culture, Writing Culture, the Poetics and Politics of Ethnography, and Roots, Travel and Translation in the late 20th century. I developed this specific point in the introduction of my dissertation in order to underline the difficulties of delimiting an object of study when its borders are moving. The promotion and circulation of images and information on the cyberspace is extremely fast. And very quickly, I was confronted to this problem, but in fact, it helped me to analyze the works I was focused on. The form reflects the content and vice versa. For example, I would like to point out that the use of digital technology coincides with the discourses related to the works studied. The artist of my corpus translated the wish to make visible to demarginalize human beings and works. That's what I wanted to show. To do this, technology is of crucial importance, especially in a world where everything goes faster and faster. Moreover, I realized that the occupation of this cyberspace by these artists, this dematerialized existence, was a metaphor of a decolonial space where borders drawn by the hand of man would no longer exist. In order to analyze the material finally collected, I chose an archaeological method. This one studies the complexity of the plasticity and the plurality of the temporalities of the studied works. It means to go back to each genealogy of images I found and to determine their political, social, cultural, and identity issues. So I would like to ask a second question. How these artworks can be called some examples of artivism? The meeting of historical, social, and cultural analysis of these works, but also aesthetic and iconographic, allowed me to highlight the core of any artistic practice. I mean, the adequacy of the form to the content, as I said before. The iconographies I qualified as hybrid are born from a mix of elements coming from Western history of art and culture of each artist. Before I pointed out that photography had emerged as the cornerstone of the artistic practices studied, this point certainly seems to be, to me, the most significant result obtained as a result of my research. Within the framework of post-colonial studies, analyzing this notion of photographic has made it possible to highlight that the image materializes the ideologies underlying colonization. Racialist theories were accompanied and nourished at the same time by the production of images in order to support their claims. Moreover, images produced constitute the core of three circles that seem to be distinct but linked by this material production. These three circles are the image, the body, and the territory. So I just would like to focus a little bit on this slide. And here on the right corner, you have a graphic that I made at the beginning of my research. And I found that the artworks I was studying bring all together like three circles: the image, the body you have here, and the territory. And so the meeting of each circle creates like another space that I call liminal space, influenced by Deleuze and Guattari. And at the end, I found that the meeting of each of these liminal spaces were created this cornerstone here, where I found what I think we can call some indigenous feminisms, intersectional and decolonial. The artworks studied revealed that there is a direct connection between the cyberspace used and the indigenous futurism raised. In this sense, I just would like to read this quotation taken from Lindsay Catherine Conham. She is a Diné, and she wrote, "The creation story is a spaceship, indigenous futurism and decolonial deep space." So she is saying, I quote, "Survival, adaptation, dynamism, they are the skills of the inhabitants of the post-apocalyptic Earthscape who have lived in since European expansion to Africa, the Caribbean, and Americas. Columbus's voyages did not only destroy the worlds of indigenous peoples in these scattered, yet now connected locations, these journeys were also the birth of a monstrous new worldview as Europe sought to twist these lands to their ends of conquest, expansion, and further conquest. In the wake of this destructive experiment of modernity, the indigenous survivors of the globe have been increasingly severed from land, knowledge, and the relationships that sustained us prior to colonization. Perhaps more incredible than what we have all lost, however, is what we have managed to hold on to and create. One of the most powerful narratives offered by indigenous futurism is that we indigenous peoples are carriers of advanced technical knowledge that can be applied in ways much more profound and generative than the extractive, destructive, life-denying processes of capitalism and Western progress. And thinking and speaking about the cyberspace as the colonial space, I wanted to show you now two pictures in particular. And just before I forget also, I wanted to maybe suggest you to see this wonderful book named Walking the Clouds. It was written by Grace Dillon, an indigenous scholar, and I think it's a very interesting book to speak about indigenous futurism. So to go back to these works, I wanted to show you. These two artworks were made by Deidre Yepapapan. She's Jemez Pueblo and Korean and based in Los Angeles. And in the artwork, you can see on the left side, in Hello Kitty Tipi, so she uses an old photograph taken by Edward Curtis during the 19th century and replaced the portrait by her own face. At the same time, she brings all together some cultural elements that are not coming from her own culture. For example, the tipi that belongs to Plains indigenous cultures, and also elements coming from the mainstream society. The famous Hello Kitty's head. This work tells us that colonization through history is a land and cultural issue that grows up until a colonization of space, meaning here the universe. And I wanted also to show you this work, Deborah Yepapapan, Long Live and Prosper spoke was a half-breed. The chaos of the universe is way much different than the chaos we see on Earth. I mean, one is made by nature, the other one is made by the human actions. To denounce this chaos, indigenous women artists denounce extractivist projects. And another image comes to my mind. This one. It's a photographic montage made by Cara Romero. She's Chemehuevi from Southern California. And in this picture, you can see above an oil infrastructure, an oil drilling infrastructure, and a man body in the water below. The character on the water is Chanupan Skaluger, a famous indigenous artist of Mandan Arikara Idatsa Lakota descent. The shape of the oil infrastructure you can see below is not insignificant. Some artists had pointed out that this infrastructure has the same shape than the female vagina with the tubes, and the ovaries. In that sense, water can be seen as the feminine flow that is the source of biological life, meaning the embryonic fluid. This connection to the land is at the core of that kind of indigenous feminism that I would like to focus on in my last part. So in my last part, I would like to try to answer to this question, how indigenous arts bear colonizing binary distinction. Even if their testimonies are in English or in French, the artists studied also mobilize words and concepts specific to their traditional languages to express themselves about their works. This point was very important to me and inspired me to write a history of contemporary art that does not only use the concepts becoming from the Western epistemology. And talking about words, I think that this book by Mishwana Goeman, Mark My Words, Native Women Mapping Our Nations, is very important. And speaking also about words, I would like to give you some examples of artworks based on my research in indigenous languages and in arts. So just before, I also would like to show you this graphic I made for my research. And I tried to maybe give an insight of how the word woman can be said in indigenous languages of the artists from the corpus. And during my research, I found an artwork, many artworks, but here today I would like to focus on an artwork named Asini Isku. I'm sorry for my pronunciation. It's made by Aurélie Journée-Duez. She's Cree Salto and Mitty. And you can see here that it's at the same time a portrait of the artist, but the landscape occupies a very important place in the photograph. And if I show you this picture, is that I would like to highlight how finally colonization is still a violence against the earth, but what Indigenous women and queer artists are saying through their works is that it's also that violence against the earth is violence against women. This is what we have seen more recently. First, the increasing rate of murders and disappearances of Indigenous girls, women, and members of the LGBTQ2+ community in the United States and Canada. Second, the multiplication of extractivist projects, fighting by many Indigenous peoples and women in particular. In this artwork made by Lori Blondo, the red dress she's wearing is a symbol dedicated to missing and murdered Indigenous women. But at the same time, we can notice that the artist chose to name his photograph with a title in her own traditional language. The Isku in Cree language means rock woman. According to the artist, I quote, "In this series of photographs, I celebrate and give homage to plains, indigenous rock formations, significant ancient sites created for sacred and rite of passage ceremonies, and for recording battles and histories. I draw from oral histories of Mistaseni, a 400-stone sacred boulder marking an important indigenous gathering place that the Saskatchewan government dynamited in 1966 to make room for a man-made lake. Capturing performative interventions in the landscape, I stand atop rocks, draped in blue-red velvet cloth, reflecting the resilience of Indigenous cultures." Another thing I think was important to my dissertation, it was to highlight that the word queer or two-spirit that are using by many Indigenous artists in my corpus, in fact, has their own equivalent in Indigenous languages from US and Canada. So here again, you have some different, you have a graphic with many different Indigenous peoples' name and the terms with which they named two-spirit people. And you can see that it depends on if it concerns a male assigned or female assigned. It's a very long graphic, so I will not speak about all this, but just to link this graphic to some artwork I studied, I wanted to show you this one, and I will not read the title because I'm afraid to not give justice to the language, but I would like to focus on the specific character that Dinah Denger, she's Anishinaabe, tries to highlight, and it's the Agokwe. And the Agokwe in Anishinaabe language means female who has a male within. And the artist herself, the work of the artist can be described, I quote, She claims and displays her hyper-modern Agokwe posture of the female who has a male within, therefore two spirits. As an artist, she offers feminist, queers, LGBTQ strong performed images, sovereign postures, without complexes, breaking with the statuses of objects of pleasures, submission, degradation, and victims. At the crossing of the warrior, the kokum, and the Agokwe queer type, Denger sometimes uses the features of the wrestler's mask, of the naked hunter that you see before, her skin coated with oil, and the expression of the fierce faces bearing the panage of the animal as a trophy. However, if we look carefully, we see that the mask is beaded minorly with the traditional motifs of the cocoons embroideries. The feminist parentage arises in this tableau vivant. So, as a conclusion, I would like to say that as US and Canadian lands were settled, occupied, and emptied of their original inhabitants, explorers and scientists took photographs to preserve the traces of what was happening. Meaning two possibilities: the disappearance of the so-called Indians, or their subjugation to the civilizing process of the Catholic residential schools. Two types of photographs were systematically taken: landscape photographs and portraits. As the indigenous lands were colonized and emptied of their first inhabitants, indigenous peoples became either images of specimens subject to racialist studies or invisible beings that were not captured in photographs of vast, empty, wild landscapes. This is how images played a fundamental role in building strong colonial and collective imaginaries. And if you look at the history of photography, colonization was not only territorial, it was also physical and spiritual. The colonization of indigenous bodies even has been carried out by the most radical murder, or by an objectification of human beings considered as savages, as illustrated by the residential schools I mentioned earlier. Indigenous women have been colonized violently by physical force and by pernicious processes that had a direct impact on their bodies, rape or forced sterilizations. Another form of violence that has been done to them is their hypersexualization, in particular through image. The photographic image has made it possible to visually translate this millefeuille that I believe colonization is. These observations also lead me to highlight an analogy formulated by the artists and indigenous activists themselves, which maybe is a real question, maybe can be qualified as ecofeminism in reference to the work of the feminist researcher Françoise de Bonne, who published in 1974, Feminism or Death. In the 70s, male domination was exercised over indigenous women through forced sterilization campaigns, revealing the biopolitical dimension of colonization. This domination is still exists today through the exploitation of natural resources of indigenous territories. But it's difficult to think this specific feminism that rays from the artworks I've studied, and I regret the absence of a paradigm that it would have been relevant to use. But so many ideas are involved into these works. And before finishing, I just would like to show you this graphic that shows some of the concepts linked to indigenous feminism. Nevertheless, some concepts are useful to analyze the artworks I show you that highlight the resilience and the powerful practices of indigenous women artists and women queer artists. Through these concepts, I'm thinking of the territorial community feminism developed by the feminist activist Lorena Camnal. She's Maya from Guatemala. She uses this notion in order to make explicit the links between body, territory, and land, as expressed in an interview with the magazine Cahiers du Genre in 1915. So to conclude, I would like to say, inspired by a book entitled the same, that it's time to make space for indigenous feminism. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Aurélie, for this brilliant presentation and very, very complex topic. So with no further ado, I'm going to ask Carmen some question. Hello, Carmen.
Hi.
So you are a multidisciplinary artist. Could you tell us about your artistic path? What made you want to be an artist? And yeah.
Hi, I just wanted to kind of reintroduce myself again in case somebody's just hopping on. I'm Carmen Selam. I am an enrolled member of the 14 Confederated Tribes and Bands of the Yakima Nation, and I live and work here in Wapato, Washington, which is on the Yakima Reservation. And I'm also Comanche. So when it comes to being an artist, what really kind of made that happen is when I was younger, I was involved in this kind of youth group sort of thing where you are at a college for 2 weeks and you experience what life's like as an artist. And this was when I was a teen, and you get to work with different mentors. So it was really cool. I got to actually see the work of Wendy Red Star early in her career, as well as Erica Lord. I still work with Sherrod Yonker, who's one of my mentors. And that way I was able to really create kind of like a network of these mentor type of high profile artists. And I feel like that was really a jumping off point for me pursuing this as a career. I ended up first going to the Oregon College of Art and Craft, which is in Portland, Oregon. And I actually decided to transfer because the culture there in Portland at that college at that time was very, very rough as an Indigenous person. Like, it was always having to affirm my identity. It was always having to explain that Native people were living people. And that's really exhausting. I ended up transferring to the Santa Fe, or the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, partially because I felt like I didn't have to work so much on educating everybody around me and doing that labor. Instead, I could just focus on my practice and becoming a better artist. So I feel like when it comes to art, every Native person is an artist in some way or fashion. Even today, I got pings like on my Facebook about somebody like selling their beadwork, or somebody willing to meet up for their special food that they just made. I think that is valid and that is art. And I also feel really thankful to always have been surrounded by that kind of culture. So that's a little bit of my story.
All right, thank you so much. So as you mentioned just earlier, like you use social medias like Facebook, Instagram. That's where I can see most of your work. Like on Instagram, you always post your art. So in your Instagram profile, for example, you depict yourself as a Yakama Comanche artist and queer. Are these the main sources of inspiration for your work? And in that sense, is visibility a key issue for an Indigenous artist, or at least for you? I don't want to tokenize you, and just like from your own experience.
Yeah, actually adding queer into my like little bio there has been a somewhat more recent development, like within the last, I don't know, couple of years. And I think that's mostly to combat those stigmas against just being a queer person. At least on my reservation, it can be very homophobic. And suicide prevention is something that I care a lot about. And I feel like being able to be out and queer is a part of that, like suicide prevention. And at least when I was younger, there was really nobody that I could think of that was like a queer idol for me that was Indigenous. I didn't have anybody to look up to. At that time, there was the bookstore Borders, and I would save my money so that I could buy like the L Word. And that's what I had. And it's just so wild because, you know, that isn't even a great depiction of culture queer culture as it is now, queer culture as it is then. It was a very like small lens, but at the time it was kind of revolutionary for me to see that. And so now that I work with youth, I'm a youth mentor also for the Yakima Nation Youth Council. So I kind of take a role in guiding them. And I think that just being an out queer woman has really kind of impacted that culture, especially since they're up and coming young people themselves. Like I have no doubts that they're going to go into the world and have their eyes a little bit more open in a positive way.
Okay, thank you. So you work with a lot of different medias, and some of them more associated with traditional indigenous skills, like beading, for example, but always like with a pop twist. So can you talk a little bit about this this part of your work? If you can show us some of your beading work, it would be really great. And
yes, I'm going to share my screen right now.
And can you talk a little bit about it? Like, what is your inspiration and how you combine this?
Yeah, just let's see. Bear with me because I'm new to Zoom and yeah. Oh, great. Yes, so this is actually, can you see?
Yes, we can see. Yes. Great.
Oh, okay. This is part of a series that I'm actually working on, and it is inspired by the plateau style beaded bags that are very prominent in my culture, and they're flat and they were used to carry a lot of different things. They're made out of either like corn husk, or the more contemporary through trade is the beaded bags. And so this piece is definitely speaking on those commodity foods which were given to the Native people. And one of the cans that's at my grandma's house right now is this beef can, and it's with juices. And this is kind of like what's expected to sustain Native people here on the reservation, at least my reservation. And I feel like a lot of other Native people can really identify with this, having championed having commodity cheese, or having the cereals, the egg powder. This is what was given to us here to sustain our life. And this piece itself is made out of seed beads, which are silver, as well as bugle beads. And I just really kind of wanted to capture that idea of popular culture here. Like if you show this to any Native people, I'm almost positive they'll know exactly the reference that it's coming from. So not just that, but I also talk about treaty rights. So this piece is called Broken Treaties and Lost Pieces. It's representative of the Polly Pocket toy. And in 1972, we got Mount Adams, which is depicted on the top here, back through Nixon's executive order. And I made this piece actually when I was residing in Flagstaff, Arizona, which is a border town. And I felt a lot of that kind of just cultural, I don't want to say hostility, but it is that at times, just that misunderstanding of Indigenous peoples in their own spaces. But this is kind of representative of that travel of having to take with me my culture everywhere I go. And with that comes those 7 yellow dots are representative of drums, which is prominent in our like cultural for religion. It's the 7 drums religion. And just kind of remembering my grandpa's hat on the stand, and even my mom's kitchen, the res car that's missing a wheel, and at the very bottom, the res dog, which can be found on any reservation, I believe. Let's see. When it comes to popular culture too, is there is this idea of it being very frozen, very still in time. You have the Edward Curtis images that everybody believes is the one and only representation of that tribe and those peoples. And Coachella Queen is kind of speaking to that because I wanted to depict the Pocahontas, which is the Pocahontas outfit, which isn't culturally accurate. You know, that wasn't what would be worn, not to mention that her age was completely misrepresented in that Disney film. And on the left side here is the garment that's worn by the fictional Native woman Tiger Lily in Peter Pan. And it's just a very romantic idea of Native women. And the figure in the middle is actually wearing the infamous Urban Outfitters Navajo panties. And I'm sure a lot of hipsters still have that, you know. And I just kind of wanted to show that how, I don't know, how divisive that can be. A lot of my work also talks about privilege. So this piece is based on old ads for lotion. And so this very beautiful woman, she's reapplying her privilege. She's covering herself entirely in it. And I think that this is still very relevant in society. I made this a few years ago. It's currently on display in a gallery right now. But yes, I don't know. I try to change with the culture. I try to show what's really happening and what's affecting us here as Native people, other Native people. And I hope that others kind of can recognize those relationships. Also during this time, I've been doing mutual aid work with the Peacekeeper Society, which is based out of based out of Yakima, the reservation. And COVID has been affecting our Native communities in a big way. Like, even, I haven't really shared this, but even I had got COVID in February, and I'm very fortunate to have had the opportunity to like overcome that. I have relatives and someone close to my age who had recently passed away from COVID. It's sadly kind of speaking back to the history of all these sicknesses like coming into Native communities and us trying to fight it off. And it's a story that's still going, and it's something that I think we're all kind of doing our best to keep contained and keep healthy and safe. And it's really isolating. We can't see our other community members. We can't really visit with the people we're used to visiting. But this is called Carmen in the Cupboard. It's a serigraph, and it's just representative of what America wants you to be. The figures here in the window are, you know, these tall, blonde, skinny mannequins. And then there's me in my traditional outfit, significantly different. Like, you can tell I'm so different. And I don't know, I think it's important to recognize that, you know, we're not all going to fit in these spaces that popular America has built for us to fit in. So I hope that kind of answers your questions and shows a little bit of my work here.
Sure. So going a little bit further with these paintings on white privilege and I guess also cultural appropriation. So how do they affect you in your art, you know? How do you as an Indigenous artist have to navigate within this American settler society? Like, for example, how do you show your work? And do you feel sometimes like there is kind of like some people, maybe settler people, are like expecting something from an Indigenous artist, and you are showing something completely different that might not even like, also the question of how do you make a living being a, you know, an artist, like the economic uh, difficulty with that, no, like what is expected from you, but also living in a capitalist society where you've got to live. So how how do you manage this, or can you even like?
I think that's definitely like an ongoing thing. When it comes to financial things, it's like when I make this work, I usually have some kind of job, some other job that will pay so that I can be able to make this work. And when it comes to patrons, galleries, museums, like a lot of getting my artwork out there is contingent on making these relationships with them. And so it can be a lot of kind of emotional labor. It can be a lot of explaining and kind of like there's definitely a give and take. And I think I'm somewhat lucky to live in a time where I'm able to have work like this. My grandfather, he's a traditional artist and a silversmith. So I grew up watching him like hustle. I grew up sleeping under his like table where he would set up at bazaars and be selling his artwork. So that way I was able to learn his trade. And I definitely study other artists too. A lot of it is related to being able to engage with your audiences. So for example, like you said that you see a lot of my work on Instagram. I try to be super active on there, and with Facebook, it's more of my older audience, and I try to engage with them too. But it's a really interesting time and place to be. I get a lot of pushback on my work. I do. It's kind of funny because I tell this story, and I think it's still super relevant. But I used to work at this store in Santa Fe called Cost Plus World Market, and I recognize everybody. You know, as a cashier, I saw everybody, and the same people that wouldn't or winning at me, or the same would go to my shows in Santa Fe and praise my artwork. And it's because I was in a different space, but I'm the same Native person. And so part of my background, even as a Native person, is I was Miss Yakama Nation. So like I did pageants, and I knew how to do all the dances and sing the songs. And my beginning was traditional art. So I kind of depicted like geographical images and animals. And I'm not digging at that. Like I always go back to that. It's something that's very innate. It's inside of me. But at the same time, like I want to be able to talk about other things that affect me. And so it is hard, and it is interesting, especially being a Native person. I feel like anything I make is going to be Native art because I am a Native person. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Carmen, for this interview and for showing us your work. And I think that at the end of the panel, we should share like your Instagram and where we can look at your work, and also like buy it, because everyone needs to eat. All right. So now is the time for the third panelist, Deidre Peaches. She will present a work. So the floor is yours.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Yat she Deidre Peaches Yanishia, Torchini Nishle, Lokat in the Abashichin, Shihin Dashache, Torchini Dashanella, Kinslana de Haliede Nasha. Hi, my name's Deidre. That's me introducing myself in my Diné language. I reside here next to our sacred mountain called Decolonial, San Francisco Peaks here in Flagstaff, Arizona. I am a filmmaker. I've been making films for the past 15 years in the region. A lot of them have been self-financed. And my work has taken me to a lot of really interesting places where I've been able to share stories and just learn from people in their communities. And so What brings me here today is to share some of the work that I've done within the past couple years, or 10 years. Just to give some background of additionally what I've done, a lot of the work as being a self-funded filmmaker is, it's tumultuous at times, because you're put in a lot of situations where the story itself is developing. And as an Indigenous filmmaker, it's important for us to tell our stories, to not have it kind of diluted in a way where it's not really true to our interpretation of what has happened. And a lot of my work stems from me wanting to become more connected to my culture. I'm not fluent in Dene, but I have used filmmaking to, as my first film, Shimasane. It was a documentary about my grandma. And I used filmmaking as a way to communicate to her. I would have my mom help me translate the questions, and then she would answer the questions that I had for her. And looking back, this was a very delicate time, because my grandma, my maternal grandma, she's in her 80s right now, and she has dementia. So a lot of those stories that the conversation I had with her at the time, she was in a different like headspace. Like, she was able to comprehend a lot more than she can now. And I think it's really important for especially Indigenous filmmakers to harness that ability to reconnect to the roots, just because colonization has disenfranchised us for since the beginning of 1492, since the first landing of the colonizers. It's important for us to tell our stories, because resource extraction has been a pillar of our toxicity that's happening in our environments and our reservations. Here in Arizona, especially in Deneta, there has been years since the development of uranium and the atomic bomb and the nuclear conquest that has happened, that has left detrimental impacts upon our communities, as far as open pit uranium mines and other resource extractions among uranium, including coal extraction. One example is for over from like 1960, I would say the 1960s to like 2005, there was the Mojave Generating Station located in Laughlin, Nevada, that would slurry water. And slurrying water is basically what they would do was that they would add water from the N aquifer, which is potable, like ice age drinking water that's underground in an aquifer that was totally drinkable, but they would mix that with coal, and they would slurry that 300 plus miles from Black Mesa, Arizona to Mojave Generating Station. So during this conquest of extractive industries, they've had, the industries have left a lot of this impact, detrimental impact left in our communities. So as like a filmmaker, as a storyteller, like it's been really important to voice a lot of those discrepancies that have happened in our communities that have been left unsaid or unreclamated in any way. So the films that you'll see today are really important as they talk about the narrative of extraction within the Dene communities and giving light to a lot of those impacts that have happened to our people. I think it's really important for there to be accountability as far as like we move forward with different administrations, and to see how termination policy has been implemented by the United States government, as far as having different administrations supporting assimilation and supporting termination policies. So these are really interesting questions as we move forward because of how the mistreatment has been for Indigenous people and how these lands have been literally stolen from us as Indigenous people living in America. And still there's no retributions. There's a lot that has been done in order to eliminate and terminate our survival. One important fact is the water. We have the Colorado River running through our the outline of Deneta, and the Diné people do not have access, do not have water rights to that Colorado River water. When since the beginning, we've been agricultural farmers. We've harvest corn and different crops like squash, and still we don't have allocated water rights to the main stem water. When we have communities like Phoenix, we have communities like Las Vegas, Los Angeles, Denver, all these municipalities that thrive at the benefit and at the genocide of Indigenous people. So with that said, I want to continue with showing you some videos that I and at the time my co-partner Jake Hoingwa had made. So please take a look.
The first people were given two choices. You either take this yellow substance or you take this yellow substance. Or something like that. And uranium. They're both almost, when you look at it, it's almost the same. So the people chose the corn pollen. And never to be disturbed, never to be brought up. If you bring it to the top, it's going to cause devastation to the people. That's what we're going through.
Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah are states home to the Navajo Nation. In 1942, the first mines opened in Monument Valley. The last mine closed in 1986. However, more than 520 abandoned uranium mines now scatter the Navajo Nation. In 2005, a moratorium was in place banning future uranium mining operations within the Navajo Nation.
There was another company called Hydro Resource Incorporated, HRI, from South Texas. Their parent company is URI, Uranium Resource Incorporated. They do a lot of ISL mining and C2 leach mining. It's even acknowledged by NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, that there has never been a successful ISL mining throughout the history of ISL mining where the mine has returned an aquifer back to its pre-mining condition. They're always left more highly contaminated than before. Not only does HRI eye in this place, but they've also looking at Crown Point. And for the town of Crown Point, they want to do this ISL mining right in the town of Crown Point's sole drinking aquifer, 2,000 feet below the surface. And with the history of ISL mining, that if God forbid, if it ever goes through, that the town is going to be a ghost town if they ever go in there and start doing what they want to do in there.
Proposed mining in the area is through a method called in situ uranium recovery. In situ recovery is an extraction method used to mine underground uranium by injecting solvents into uranium-rich rock layers and then pumping the dissolved uranium out. The company Hydro Resource Incorporated is currently seeking approval to conduct in situ mining near the towns of Crown Point and Church Rock, New Mexico.
Lake Artisana Agins, Eugénie and the Quaitlas to Penac and the Artisana. What Ashast it has totally only Hassan Zao 8 has to yes. Just 8 Anna, Uncle That's easy.
Little did we know that it was unsafe, that it would do something later to you in life. And a lot of people found it just good for like economics, you know, to make money, not really knowing what they were doing to Mother Earth, damaging the water, the air, even the environment, the whole environment itself. And later we found out that, you know, later in life I found out that it was unsafe because I worked there, you know, being a single parent, I had to find a job, and that's where I worked, down in the mines alongside the miners, because whenever they did blasting of the mine area, we would be the first ones to go in there and check how high the grade is on this uranium. And little did I know that it might affect me. And back in 2006, I was diagnosed with lymphoma, and we think it's probably from that. So I've been having health problems just from the chemo, from the cancer. So
then a lot of people work here, and they said they all develop some sickness like cancer and stuff like that. When we go out somewhere, I think people came all over to work here and they got affected by it. And I've been living here since 1946. In fact, I was born just right here. And while we were growing up, back then we were kids, there's this place they call it now No Name Arroyo here. There used to be water running down from that mine up there. We used to all play in it. And then there's a little water hole down there. We'll go swimming there. We didn't know it was contaminated.
It wasn't until the early part of the 2000 decade that the extent of the contamination throughout this area was understood. This mine last produced uranium in 1982. And here we are 30 years later, and we're still figuring out how to clean it up.
On July 16th, 1979, the United Nuclear Corporation's Church Rock uranium mill tailing disposal pond breached its dam. Over 1,000 tons of solid radioactive mill waste and 93 million gallons of acidic radioactive tailings solution flowed into the Puerco River. The Puerco River is a tributary to the Little Colorado River, where its flow joins the main stem of the Colorado River. The Colorado River is utilized by 25 million people living in such cities as Phoenix, Tucson, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and San Diego.
The mine company left us with contaminated waste for the communities to deal with. No comprehensive health studies. People are dying in this area of one form of cancer or another. I'm experiencing a respiratory problem, and I contribute that to breathing in the dust.
Very similar situation in the mines, where you had a lot of dust and you had a lot of diesel exhaust from the equipment that was underground, and the radon particles could also cling to that. So it got inhaled by the miners, deposited in the lungs, and there it's quite toxic. It causes lots of damage. It can either break cells and pass on with damage to the DNA. It can kill cells outright. And it can also not cause any damage to the cells. So, radiation has a mixture of possible effects, and obviously what we associate is the damage that either kills cells directly and leads to long-term damage in organs, or that leads to genetic damage that then gets passed on through generations.
You can compare these Western scientific understandings of the chemistry of this substance with these traditional teachings of what would be the consequences of bringing this out of the earth. And I think that, we've seen that. We have 520 examples on the Navajo Nation of abandoned mines that all have environmental problems. And throughout the United States, especially in the Western United States, They say that there's more than 10,000 abandoned uranium mines, and they all have these problems. Once it's taken out, it will always have some permanent, long-lasting effect on the surrounding land. And it's from one end of the globe to the next. That's been the history of uranium development. And we just happen to sit on some of it here in the Four Corners where those effects have been manifest and have, harmed generations of people.
Nope, there's no water. Yeah, from here. From here, see, this one's going empty too. And this is Box Springs. This goes all the way down to the canyon. I could smell the water last night. The muddy water. I made a lot of enemies, cause I'm the first one that said that this water is no good. Don't drink it. From my own family, my relatives. But they're all gone. Everybody's gone. There's problems with my children. I have 2 sons and a daughter, and my generation's gone. My generation's gone. They don't want to have, my daughter doesn't want to have babies because they're going to come out deformed. So she says, no, I'm not going to have no kids. I'm not going to be a grandma. But on Manali, my last one had twins, a boy and a girl, but they have heart problems too. I had tumors, big old tumors growing on me, which I wasn't aware of. And then till now, that was just like my neck, right down here, there's a long scar. And that tumor was removed, and that they cut most of my nerves, and that's why I can't. I'm not like I used to be anymore. And I was about 300, close to 300 pounds, and now look at it, I'm losing weight because they cut most of my esophagus off, and I have to eat hot, soft foods and twice a day. I'm not hungry at all. And there's a lot of depression. As you can see, all the rocks fell down and probably hiding a lot of things. They've been working, trying to hide everything, but you could see it, with me.
The Box Springs well, near Black Falls, Arizona, is listed by US EPA as having an exceedance in uranium contamination based on the maximum contaminated drinking water standards. In 2004, the Navajo Nation EPA concluded that 30% of families were without access to drinking water. On the reservation, many domestic water haulers pay thousands of dollars, more than off-reservation communities, for drinking water. Many families haul from unregulated sources. These include livestock wells, community wells, springs, and windmills. Despite possible contamination, some water haulers rely on unregulated water sources.
They're all like this sometimes. Some places they look like this. This is a unregulated water source. We're mostly going to sample for heavy metal.
Since the Navajo Nation lacks the infrastructure
of those potable water, a lot of people rely on those unregulated water sources.
Water from these sources often contain bacteria, uranium, and other harmful chemicals. The use of unregulated water sources represents the greatest public health risk associated with drinking water.
We need science to get some answers, and then from there use the results to do policy work related to that. I know a lot of people are interested in nuclear power, and the Navajo Nation have quite a bit of uranium ore, so the younger generation or high school students and whatnot need to know the consequences of mining our natural resources, especially uranium mining.
In 2012, the Navajo Nation Council passed the Radioactive Material Transportation Act, allowing the nation to regulate uranium transportation. However, in 2013, the Resource and Development Committee passed a resolution for Uranium Resource Incorporated to receive right-of-way and surface mineral access rights to its site in Church Rock, New Mexico. Please voice your opposition against in situ ISL uranium mining. Contact your local council delegate.
You can't negotiate my future away!
companies. For our land. Our water, our future. Our water, our future. Our
he only brings pain. Shame on McCain. 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 He only brings pain.
We know that McCain is going to be here today for the Navajo Code Talker event, and that, putting the message out there that he's not welcome to our homelands because of past water agreements, negotiations, land exchange bills that he's tried to propose not only on Diné people but on other indigenous tribes out there. So just letting him know that he's not welcome here, and we need to protect our water and save our water for ourselves and our future generations.
Now, great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren. The state of Arizona, the delegation to Governor 30th of the state government So let's hear the State of Arizona delegation. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, the Speaker of our Navajo Nation Council, Mr. Lorenzo Bates. Let's give him a nice round of applause.
Today we remember that over 300 of our Navajo Marines who understood that our language was not only a part of our sacred identity, but it would be used against enemies who threatened our homelands.
Protect our people. For the ones that are not Native, respect this. Listen, feel it. This is why we're here. You never felt this. Listen, this is healing you. This is our responsibility, all Native people. This is our responsibility to sing these songs, to teach these guys what to respect, how to respect. They don't know anything. They just know disrespect, how to divide us, how to talk bad about each other. Money, 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 power, control. That's what you protect. Greed. Our life sustains us. These songs sustain us. Not only us, but life in general.
This is a continuance of genocide. You're
Remember
supporting
your
genocide.
Oath. That oath that you took is sacred to us, to our people. The ones, your border towns, outside your jurisdictions, you so-called protect and serve. Same for our people, our warriors here with that badge on. Remember who we're really protecting. Remember what we're really defending. Remember what they did to us. It's still what they're doing to us.
Remember what they did to your
Right there,
elders.
it's happening, right there.
What's going on?
They came in a boat, in the Bible. Now they come with a business agenda and in black SUVs. There's nothing different.
I saw White Shadow. She is really here. She is all around us. And minorities here. We should not fear. And we should fight for our water. We should not perish. And we should fight for our water. How you done for our water? We should pray to it. And what you done?
Take it, Cooper. Take it. Get the hell off of there, bitch! See ya! Got it! What? Get off our land! Get off our land, boy! Airport? Airport.
Try to grab Cooper. Try to grab Cooper? Yeah. Some freaking white though, tall white cop. Pull up. Y'all grab Cooper.
Protect our children! Water! Protect our water! Protect our children! Twerky minds up! Enough! Twerky minds up! Enough! Children! Fight for the children! Protect the children! Twerky minds up! Enough! Twerky minds up! Enough! Twerky minds up! Enough! Twerky minds up! Protect our children! Protect our water! Us showing it! The air body! Fight for the children! Fight for the children! For the children! Remember the children! Fight for the children!
Thank you very much, Deidre, for letting us show these two powerful documentaries. And well, they're from 2015, but I would like, well, the Navajo Nation has been hit very, very hard by the COVID-19, as other Indigenous nation, and this is in part due because of the lack to running water. And can you? I know that you said before that at the beginning of the pandemic you've been filming. I know you've been helping a lot with mutual aid. So could you tell us about like what did you do? What like as a documentary filmmaker? Can you talk about this part, please?
Yes. So at the beginning of the pandemic, there was an onslaught of not knowing the contamination rate and not knowing if the particles at which that COVID is spread, what would be the viral intake, what would be a common, like what were susceptible aspects of getting the virus. So in the beginning, I was completely, I knew what I needed to do as a filmmaker in documentation, but I also had a tremendous amount of fear in doing so, because I was putting myself in a situation that did not know what the implications could be when contracting COVID. So in that case, in the beginning, at this time last year, I was looking up PPEs, I was looking at protocols that were used in Wuhan as far as to protect yourself, and that included using a Tyvek suit. It included covering up your eyes so none of the orifices of your body can contract the virus. And so that also included wearing the N95 respirators, and just being very cognizant of what I'm putting myself through. So in the beginning, I was dressed in full Tyvek suit. I went to populations on the Diné Navajo reservation that were hit tremendously by COVID, and the fact that there is no running water posed a huge threat to the people as far as being able to cleanse themselves if they had come in contact with the virus. And for just to give context on to the livelihood on the reservation, there's only 13 grocery stores in an area the size of West Virginia. So you have this huge landmass and not enough accessibility to the resources and to food and to water that would generally be found in other places more accommodating other municipalities. So in the beginning of the pandemic, I was completely scared. I was very fearful, but I knew what I needed to do as far as documenting like what was happening, and being in that area of seeing what was happening as far as help and mutual aid efforts. And in the beginning, what was happening was there was a lot of hysteria in a way. There's people just trying to help in many ways as possible. There was multiple mutual aid efforts that were sprouting in different communities. And this just goes to show that there was not a good plan that was put in place in order to accommodate a pandemic of this sort. So it started with documentation in Tuba City, where I filmed a water distribution that was happening in the area, that they had distributed water cans to both the Hopi and Navajo communities of that region. And from there, also had gone to Hogback Shiprock area, and then also Gallup, New Mexico. And what I can say is all throughout the Navajo reservation, there was, everyone was dealing with the onslaught of COVID. And it was really unfortunate. And it's even now just reflecting back about how many lives have been lost and how many family members I have lost due to COVID. And you can ask almost any Diné person here, and they have at least one member or a couple members of their family, immediate family, friends who have had some experience with COVID. And so as time persisted on with the pandemic, I had even developed COVID myself, and had gone through all the different like breathing. I had like a fog memory. I couldn't really think. I had high fevers, but one of the things like I had to have was like an oxygen kind of like respirator thing that I had at home that was helping to keep my O2 above 80, I think 89. And so it was a lot to deal with, from documenting COVID and then contracting COVID, and then essentially to becoming a voice of kind of, because one of the things in public health is just being voicing those the virus, just having that open dialogue. And so I became like a source to other friends that had contracted COVID, and talked with them, and helped kind of like guide through the symptoms that they were exhibiting. And I think that was really important too, as far as having that dialogue of people and being like, okay, this is, even though it's personal information, like I felt like me being a filmmaker and also me being in sort of a public arena just needed to have that dialogue. And it was very important too, because I had people afterwards saying like, hey, like, I'm so glad, like, I'm glad you felt like the power, or you felt the need to voice what you have gone through, because that essentially helped in my decision on whether I should be a part of like this meeting or be a part of this event or whatever. So it gave a lot of kind of just like forewarning through my experience, and having that open dialogue to help with people in making their own decisions, because with the virus and with COVID-19, it's not, if you think the vaccine is something like that's uncomfortable, but having the virus is totally uncomfortable. And I would definitely promote like getting vaccinated when you can, but it's just been a whirlwind since last year, this time to this year now. I feel like I've grown tremendously as a filmmaker, and also too from someone who has experienced that. And also what was weird in one particular instance was when Gallup, when they had when the Navajo Nation had experienced this influx of COVID sort of related cases, the city of Gallup actually shut down like their commerce to the Navajo Nation. So a lot of people on the Navajo Nation rely on border towns in order to get all their necessary food and supplies. And so at the time, the city of Gallup had actually stopped any of that commerce, and they had like a curfew. And so they even had checkpoints where they stopped people from coming in. And so even with that, that's human rights violations as far as like getting the necessary supplements and just supplies that are needed. So I think there's a lot to digest as we're coming out of COVID, of just like how have our communities, how can they be better prepared in the future when there might be more pandemics on their rise. So I think this is something to that we'll be talking about for decades on.
All right, thank you very much. There is a question on that topic from White Pat. Please clarify which areas, reservations, Navajo, Oak Flats, are you working in, and what percentage of the people in each area have access to potable water, which is uncontaminated? So if you can answer the question, I think it's for you.
Yeah, so basically Navajo Nation is located in the upper region of Arizona and New Mexico, and Oak Flat is located in the kind of midsection of Arizona, and that's Apache territory. And so like what was happening in that video with McCain and what was happening in Navajo was solidarity between both the Oak Flat constituents there, like the movement that was happening, and then, or that's continuing to happen, and also too with what's going on Deneta. So both of those are related because as Indigenous people, we're fighting together in order to maintain the livelihood and also to the respect of Mother Earth. And so I think for the most part, a lot of different groups find solidarity in the work that they do, and they're able to help each other. And that's what we need in these certain times that we're dealing with global warming and different sort of climate change and everything. And I think like as Indigenous people, we only have a small fraction of our whole population, but we have a big voice to talk to what is happening.
All right, and they're also asking if you can provide links to your films and other contact information. So yeah, if you can share them with me, okay. And we can share them here or in the box or on the Latin American Institute page on Facebook. We will put the links for sure of the different interventions.
Perfect.
Are there any other questions from the public? Okay, I would like to ask Carmen. Carmen, I know that you also been working in mutual aid relief this summer, like you said. So would you like to talk about that that important work you've been doing? I know you've been also supporting with your art, making shirts, and so could you please tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. The mutual aid work that I do with the Peacekeeper Society is mostly about like food distribution, as well as handing out like masks and sanitizer, gloves, things like that. And it's been really important at this time on my reservation because a lot of people aren't able to like go to work or get jobs because everything is so shut down. I believe we're in what's called phase 2, which is still just a lot of shutdown, which is, good for the general health. And as far as art goes, I just designed a t-shirt for the organization that depicts my brother, he's younger, and mask and just masked individual. And I think that just even a part of the mutual aid work is kind of convincing people to wear masks. It's really weird and it's needed right now because we're not able to gather. Like we can't do our traditional ceremonies really, we can't do any of that. And it's been really impacting my community. And I think just being able to have an outlet to provide food for people when they can't themselves like go get it necessarily because of financial reasons or any other type of reasons, it's been really helpful. So we've been doing that kind of bi-weekly, also invited by surrounding tribes. So I kind of see it as reintroducing those ancestral ties we have with the other tribes, strengthening those at this time, which is kind of odd, but has been really important.
All right, thank you very much. Could you and Deidre kind of tell us projects you are working on right now? Like, what are your different projects? That would be really cool. Thank you.
Should I start? Yeah. So
go ahead,
different
Deidre.
projects. Okay. So I'm working on a project right now called Voices of the Grand Canyon. And a couple years back, I had the opportunity to interview 5 individuals from different tribal backgrounds: Wallapai, Havasupai, Dene, Hopi, and Zuni, talking about the importance of the Grand Canyon and what it means to Indigenous people of the area. And so that's going to be a short documentary, about 10 minutes. I was able to get music curated for it. So it's going to be done sometime in the next couple months. So that's kind of like one of the bigger projects I'm working on. And then I'm trying to finish a feature-length documentary called Protect. And this was based on a caravan journey back in 2016. And unfortunately, I had a hard drive crash on me. So I had to like rebuild it. And that's been a lot. And so, yeah, so that's been a process. And yeah, that's where I'm at right now. And just like a lot of small, like low budget projects with friends, filming music videos. That's always fun, because I feel like the art, the documentaries, and like the music videos and narratives, they're all like part and parcel to like our identity as Native people. And as much as we can showcase how we feel and what we like and who we are, the better that people can stop thinking about us as something of like 100 years ago, as people of the past, rather than people who are right now living and existing and breathing.
It's really cool, actually, because Deidre and I, we collaborate every now and then. We've known each other for like 10 years or something like that. That's pretty wild. That's cool. I hope you release that soonish.
And we have a short film with Carmen. We have a short film with Carmen too. That's not finished.
Talk about that, Deidre. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. As far as what I'm working on, I have a solo show. I partnered with a local coffee shop, which is called Collaboration Coffee, and they highlight a lot of people of color and Indigenous women. And so I have a show coming in July. So I'm just working on some new pieces for that. It's a solo show. And then right now, I currently have a show called There's No I in Identity with the Native curator, Jonah Kathleen, and that's in Ellensburg, Washington. And they have a, you can check it out virtually too. And I also am just working on a long-term projects, passion projects, if you will. So a lot of beading, making those bags I kind of briefly mentioned in my presentation. So just a lot of stuff here and there.
Lovely. Thank you so much for this information. And for you tonight, well, for me it's tonight, but for you it's like noon. So I want to
yeah,
all of you panelists. It's really been a great moment, and to be able to highlight Native artists and the constant link they have with the community. Like, it feels like it is always working within your community. Like, everything in the end turns to that.